Hello, fellow adventurers, and welcome back to another episode of Word Safari. We've been talking about a lot of different topics recently, but I thought it was time to go back and look at another fun Latin root to see all the words that we get out of that particular root in English today. Now, this is going to be a two-part episode. This first episode is going to kind of just lay the groundwork and talk about some basic words that we get from this root, and then the second one will go a little bit more in depth. So let's get started. What root are we talking about in this episode? We're talking about words in English that have miss or mit in them. And these come from one particular Latin verb. That Latin verb was mitto or missum, which meant to send. And these are both what we call in Latin principal parts of the verb. They are different ways that the verb might look depending on what you were trying to say with it. So mitto is the present tense. If you want to say I'm sending something, you would say in Latin mitto. Whereas missum is the past participle. It means something is sent. It can also act as an adjective, like the thing that has been sent is describing that thing, so it's an adjective. So mitto is the present tense, missum is the past participle, and then in Latin you can make a noun off of this root as well, and that would look like something like mission there. You can see it there. It might be mission, missionem, whatever the ending is in Latin. But in English, we often, of course, are just going to chop the ending off of the Latin word and use the root because it's easier that way. So we get a lot of mission-looking words in English that are nouns or that come from that noun. But since the past participle and the noun both have miss, if we have a miss word in English, it's going to come from one of those two things. But the question is simply which one. So we get words from all three of these. We get words from the present tense mitto, from the past participle missum, and then from the noun missio, missionem, whatever it was in Latin. Let's take a look at some basic words. You can probably already guess. I know you can already guess one of them because it's basically on your screen right now. Let's take a look at some basic words that we get in English from this root. Of course, the first one we're going to look at is the easiest one, and that is mission. Mission just comes from that noun, the mission stem that we were just talking about and just looking at. What is a mission in English, and why does it come from this Latin root? Well, the original meaning of the word mission, going all the way back to Latin, was a sending. Somebody is sending somebody for a particular purpose to do something. So sending is really fundamentally at the etymological foundation of what this word means, coming from Latin. Now, today, you don't necessarily have to be sent to be on a mission, or maybe you can send yourself. You can say I'm on a mission to do something, which doesn't necessarily mean anybody sent you out, right? It could just mean you decide to go do something and you have a goal and you know what it is. So we have broadened the horizon of this word a little bit, but sending is still fundamental to the idea of what a mission is because it comes from this Latin root. All right, let's get a little bit more complicated. Let's see if you can guess any of the other words that we're going to talk about. I'll give you 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1 to guess this. Okay, let's keep going. How about missionary? That was obvious, right? I promise we will get harder, but missionary, of course, does come from this root and is directly connected to mission. This just comes from the Latin term mission. By the way, the sh was a later development. This wouldn't have been pronounced sh like mission. It was mission in Latin. This comes from the Latin mission plus a suffix arius, which just means pertaining to. So this is a person or a thing that is pertaining to a mission. That's the original meaning of the word missionary. It came to mean someone who has been sent out for a particular purpose. And again, we have broadened the semantic spheres of this word today because if we say that somebody is a missionary for something, they may be sent out by a particular group, but usually the idea is that there's a particular goal in mind as well. And that honestly might be the main thing that we focus on when we are talking about who and what a missionary is. Okay, I told you we're going to get a little harder. Let's see if you guessed any of these next couple words that also come from this root. How about missile? Missile and missionary are probably not words that you would normally put together. They are in very different semantic spheres in the modern English language. However, they both do come from this particular Latin root. Now, see if you can guess why a missile comes from this root. What does a missile do? It flies or goes from one place to another, but for it to do so, what does it have to do? It has to be sent or thrown, as we might say, by somebody. That's the whole point of a missile, is it gets sent or thrown by somebody, usually at somebody or something else. Now, the old meaning of the word missile was basically anything that gets shot. So, like an arrow, often would have been considered a missile. Nowadays, in the past, 50 to 100 years, we started using missile a little bit more exclusively to refer to a certain kind of very technologically developed item that might be sent from one place, or maybe in this case, country, to another. And that's what we think of when we think of a missile. But the older meaning of the word missile could really just be anything that was thrown or shot or fired, arrows, bullets, whatever it is. It didn't necessarily have to be an intercontinental ballistic missile like we might think of this word referring to today. And it all goes back to this Latin root that means something that's sent from one place to another. Pretty simple once you see it. What's another word we get from this root? How about missive? Just change one letter from missile to missive, and you get a new word that, again, doesn't mean anything like the old word that we just changed it from. But that's the cool thing about learning these roots, is you don't have to change much to get entirely new words, and all you have to do is know what those roots mean to really be able to connect them. So missive comes from the Latin missivis, which just means something sent. Again, that was not originally a very complicated definition in Latin. A missive today is like a written letter or some form of communication that you are using to send some knowledge or something to somebody else. That's all really a missive is, because it does come from this root. What else? How about message? You probably don't use the words missile and missive in your everyday life, but I bet you do use the word message in your everyday life. Message comes from this root. As you can see, it looks a little bit different. For instance, the I vowel has been changed to an E vowel. As you can probably guess, especially if you've been watching this channel for a while, that's French's fault. So we actually got this from Latin, but through Old French, which changed the word. So in Old French, it was spelled exactly the same way, would have been pronounced something like message or something like that. And it just meant words that were sent. So even in Old French, it still had this basic etymological meaning that comes from Latin, that something is being sent, some communication, some content is being sent from somebody to somebody else, and that's essentially what a message is. The original Latin term would have been missaticum, which is obviously built off of this root with some extra stuff at the end, and then French basically dropped the second I, the one between the T and the C, and kind of ran the T and the C together, voiced them, made them a fricative, and that's where you get that zh sound from what was originally a tick sound. It's a normal thing that French does when it evolves and erodes words from Latin. Okay, so message comes from this root. It's just something you send. So you can probably guess that another word that we get from this particular root that is connected to message, if message means communication sent, you can be a messenger, right? A messenger is somebody who carries a message or brings a message. In other words, brings some kind of communication or content from one entity to another. This also comes from the Old French messager, which again is closely connected. But you can see there is at least one difference here between the French word and the English word as far as the spelling and the pronunciation, and that is we added an N in there in English. Now, you probably noticed just now when you were comparing these two words, or you certainly can now that I'm bringing it to your attention, that message, the last word we looked at, doesn't have an N in it there. It's not message, right? Nobody says, I'm going to send you a message. But you say, I'm going to send a messenger. So why do those two words not match up? Why is it that one of them has an N and one of them doesn't? Especially because in French, neither of them had an N, and in Latin, neither of them had an N. So where is this N coming from? It's a little bit mysterious, but we do see it in some other words in the English language and some other pairs of words in the English language. So for instance, passenger is related to the word passage, but you can see that passage does not have an N in it and passenger does, even though passenger really should be passenger, just like messenger should be messenger without an N. So where does this N come from? It's one of those little quirks of language that happens sometimes. It doesn't seem to be a regular thing, so we can't write a sound law about it like we can for most other things. But it does show up other places. And it seems to have happened in, say, the late Middle Ages, like the late Middle English period, when this N started to show up mysteriously in certain words like messenger and passenger and a few others. But it always seems to happen before a G sound, so that might be a little bit of a hint as to what is going on. Either way, messenger used to be messenger without the N, and it ultimately comes through Old French from the Latin root that we are talking about here, which of course makes sense because a messenger is not only taking something, some communication that is being sent from somebody to another, but that person might have been sent themselves. So it actually kind of makes sense. All right, what else do we get from this particular root? Again, we're going from easiest to hardest as far as words you might guess. So how about mess? If we just chop it all the way down, chop off the udge of message or the enger of messenger, we just get the word mess. Now you might be like, okay, wait, it looks kind of similar. I mean, mess looks like miss and messenger and things like that, but this has nothing to do with sending. I mean, if you have a mess in your house, how does it have anything to do with sending? And you would be correct, because messes today don't have anything to do with sending. This is going to be a pretty fascinating semantic journey that we have to follow this word on from the miss root way back in Latin that meant send through French all the way into English, and then seeing the evolution of this word in the English language, just sort of our own native development and fermentation of this particular word. Now, the word was originally borrowed into English, like I said, from Old French, and in Old French, it was just mess. Very simple word. You can see it right there. And the original meaning of this word was actually food. It was a portion of food or a prepared dish. Now, that's already kind of far from the original meaning of this root that meant to send, but you can still see the connection because the original idea was that the cook or the chef or whoever was making the meal would send a portion or send a dish out to you, and that's all a mess was in Old French. It was a sending. It was a sending of food from the kitchen to the table, a portion of dish, whatever it was. So that actually kind of makes sense. And of course, this would have originally been from the Latin participle form, missum, something that has been sent, that sent idea that goes all the way back to Latin. Now, when we borrowed this word into English, that was all that it meant. And we still have remnants of this meaning in English, like a mess hall is a place where people go to eat, where the chefs or cooks or whoever send food out, right? A mess kit is a way that you can make food yourself. So if you look around English and you see phrases like mess hall or mess kit, again, you can see relics of the old meaning of the word mess. However, pretty recently, like maybe 100 to 200 years ago, this word started evolving in kind of an unexpected direction. And by unexpected, I mean that if you were an alien living, if you were a person or an alien visiting the world in the year 1800 and you were trying to study human language, you would say, this word doesn't seem like it's going to evolve anywhere. Why would it? This is some of the interesting stuff that we study on this channel, because sometimes, whether you're a human or an alien or any creature, you just can't predict where the language is going to go. And this is a great example of that. So in the 1800s, this word was being used as a food dish, but it was often used specifically for liquidy or pulpy food. In other words, food that would be what we might today call messy, but they didn't actually have that word yet in the modern sense. So in the 1800s, the word started to evolve from a food dish that might be liquidy or pulpy or gooey or something like that to the quality of what that looks like on your plate. Or maybe, let's say, you drop it on the floor of the cafeteria or something like that. The word transferred its semantics from the dish to the quality of the dish or the common quality of the dish. And then, strangely enough, the word kept evolving to the point where today in modern English, I don't know about you, but I almost exclusively use the word mess to mean anything that is messy. I don't think in my English I would ever use this word to really refer to a dish. This is something that we have totally evolved away from. And as much as I use the word mess, I probably use the word messy, the adjective that goes with it, even more often to refer to just anything that is, again, messy. I don't even need to explain it to you, right? It's a very common word we use all the time. But 200 years ago, we would have never seen this semantic evolution coming. Yet here we are. We've gotten from point A to point B to point H, or something that you would have never really expected to happen. And we use this word in a way that if you're just looking at it, You would never guess that it comes from the send root way back in Latin, at least semantically. Now, when you look at it, it hasn't changed the sounds very much. The phonology is very similar. But as far as the semantics, it takes a lot of explanation to get from point A to, like I said, point H. But once you see it, it makes a lot of sense. So pretty cool stuff, right? What's another word that we get from this root way back in Latin? This is going to be a similar journey, although not quite as complicated. How about the word mass? Now, I'm not talking about mass like I have a certain amount of mass in my body or something like that. That's actually a different word that comes from a different origin. We're talking about mass as in the church service, like you go to a Catholic mass or something like that. This does come from Old English nesse, so this was not a borrowing into French. This was a borrowing directly from Latin into Old English. Old English borrowed a lot of Latin terms, especially terms that had to do with Christianity, had to do with the Catholic Church, because of course this was the period in which the English became Christianized by the Catholic Church. So they just borrowed a lot of Latin terms straight into English during the Old English period without French needing to be an intermediary. So the Old English messa just comes from the participle missum, but it actually comes from the feminine form missa. You can just see the ending is a little bit different there. Why does it come from this? This is actually something that we talked about in a previous safari. Actually, we talked about this on the Christmas episode, which is still one of my favorite episodes. Lots of cool stuff in there. So you may want to go watch it if you haven't yet, or, at this point, maybe just wait till December because we're about half a year away from that. We think that the reason that the Mass is called the Mass in English is that it's named after the concluding words of the Mass, which were in Latin until very recently, always. And those words were ite missa est, which means go, it has been sent. And you can see the sent idea there in Missa, it meaning the prayer. And there are some other theories, like maybe some certain people are being sent out at a certain point in the service, although that wouldn't necessarily explain the feminine ending on missum. Okay, so they just changed the vowel a little bit, and the mass is descending. Literally, that's what a Catholic mass is. It's descending. You go through the service, and then you get sent away, or the prayer gets sent and you leave. And that's how the service got named. Again, you wouldn't necessarily predict that the name would come from that, but it certainly seems to based on our understanding of linguistic history. Okay, so those are some words that come from the miss or mit root way back in Latin that have something to do with sending, even if they don't necessarily seem to have anything to do with sending anymore, especially the last two. However, there are a lot of other words that we get from this Latin verb mitto or missum in English as well, but with a little bit of a twist. Latin was a language that liked to form new verbs, not by totally making up new words, but by forming compounds. In other words, putting a preposition or like a short little word that shows direction or something onto the front of a verb and just smushing them into one word, one new verb that has shades of meaning of the old verb and might just be a simple meaning of 1 + 1 = 2 as far as the semantics of the two parts go, but sometimes could get a little bit more complicated than that. We've already seen this in Word Safari. We actually had several episodes way back in the first 10 episodes, and I'll put a link up here if you want to go look at those, talking about one particular prefix that Latin used a lot, and that was this one right here, the Latin preposition odd. Now, odd, and again, you can go look at that link if you want to watch both episodes on this. Lots of great words in English that have this odd in them. And one of them, or one set of them, are these verbs right here that are now at the top of your screen. It's a compound between mitto or missum and the preposition odd. You just sort of glue odd onto the front of mitto or missum and you get a new verb. Now, this one in Latin makes sense because mitto or missum means to send and odd means to or toward or into. That's the basic meaning of odd. So if you odd mitto somebody, you are sending them toward something, or maybe you're just sending them in, like you're guarding a door and you admit them into the place, and so you send them in, right? So you can see how this word might have gotten used in Latin. And we just borrowed this again. We borrowed this straight from Latin, and you can see how this is working. So, like I said, one of the fundamental meanings of the word admit in English is to let somebody in, and that goes straight back to the Latin verb ad mitto from 2,000 years ago because that's what it meant. But once you know what ad means and once you know what mitto means, then you can figure this out pretty quickly. Now, of course, we borrowed parts of both ad mitto and ad missum. So again, as a verb to admit somebody into, I don't know, a concert or a movie or something, like the ticket there on your screen that says admit one, means to let them in. There's something that's going to let you, or somebody who's going to let you in to somewhere, send you into the movie theater or whatever it is you have a ticket for. Admissions, right? You might go up to a window that's labeled admissions and buy a ticket to a particular movie. So admission obviously has the double S instead of the T there because it comes from a different part of the verb. Actually, this probably comes from the noun because it's a noun in this case. So admission is the process of letting someone in, and it's closely connected to the verb admit, right? And then we have an adjective like admissible, which has the able thing at the end, which just it comes from able. So admissible means able to be sent in. Of course, we use this word frequently in the courtroom, right? Where you have admissible evidence or something like that. However, in English, the word actually evolved a little bit. And if anything, we probably use the word admit in a second semantic context more commonly than we do in this first semantic context. Now, unlike the word mess, we haven't really mostly gotten rid of the first context because you can still admit somebody to a movie theater or to a university or wherever. So we totally still use it in the first way. But we also use it a lot in this second way, don't we? Where somebody admits something, which basically you might be wondering, okay, well, how did this semantic evolution happen? Basically, the original idea of this is that you are letting an argument or a proposition into the realm of agreed upon truth. So if you don't admit something, you're denying it, or you're just not saying anything about it. So you're not saying this is true, you're not saying you did something or whatever. But let's say you do admit something or you admit to something, that means you are letting it in. You're letting it past your defenses. Like you're standing guard over the truth of what really happened. And if you admit something, then you're saying, yep, that really happened. I'm not going to defend myself or somebody else on this particular thing anymore. So you can kind of see the evolution from admitting someone into a movie theater to admitting a proposition or an argument or an idea into the realm of truth that we all agree on. And in this sense, we also have the noun admission, but it doesn't necessarily mean the same thing as the first admission, right? So the first admission means, again, letting you into a movie theater, university, whatever it is you're getting admitted to. But in this case, if you have an admission, if you say, I have an admission to make, it's an instance of you letting some particular argument by you into the realm of agreed upon truth. So you can see that these two ideas of admitting and admission have started to diverge semantically, but we can still see back to the juncture where they split up and kind of understand where they came from originally, going all the way back to Latin. Now, I wanted to start with this particular preposition, odd, because we have already seen this on Word Safari. And again, if you haven't seen it, you can go back and review it if you want. But we've already seen the preposition odd, and so you know how this works. However, there are a lot of other words in English that also have miss or mit in them that don't start with M at all. So if you look them up in a dictionary under miss or mit, you're not going to find them because they have a Latin preposition glued onto the front of them, just like admit. Now, this is your homework. I don't really give homework very often on this channel. So, a little fun thing for you to think about between now and the next time that I post a video, which will be part 2 of this. See if you can brainstorm how many words you can come up with that have mit or miss or mission in them, but that have a short, maybe 1 or 2 syllable prefix on them like odd. So you can admit. What else can you do that's mit or mission? See how many you can come up with, and we're going to talk about a lot of them next time. See you then.